Stopping the search for external validation is breaking the most silent and dangerous addiction there is. Because as long as you keep waiting for others to applaud you, you will never know your true power. Today they celebrate you, and tomorrow they forget you. That's how fragile the value is that depends on others' opinions. Every time you hand over your self-esteem to the eyes of the world, you become a prisoner of a judgment that changes with the mood of others. And that is the hardest slavery, living concerned about what others think instead of living aligned with who you are. Stoicism does not soften this truth. It throws it straight like a spear to the chest. If you seek validation outside, you will never be free. Rejection is not the end of your dignity. It is the clarity that tells you who you really are without adornments. Loneliness is not punishment. It is the terrain where you discover that you can stand without emotional crutches. Accepting even your shadows, your fears, and your disappointments does not make you weak. It makes you invincible, because you learn not to hide anything and to transform every wound into strength. Authentic strength does not need a stage or applause. It is forged in silence, in the discipline that no one sees, in the consistency of standing firm even though the world remains silent. It's the process of burying the old self that lived begging for approval and giving birth to a new identity that does not waver in the face of criticism or praise. That is the true power, not the noise from outside, but the unshakable calm from within. When you understand this, you no longer need anyone to tell you how much you are worth. You know it and you live it. You will walk with your head held high, with a silent strength that does not depend on applause or external care. This is the emotional sovereignty that the Stoics defended. Being your own support, your own guide, your own judge. Stay until the end, because here you will discover 8 practices that will tear you away from the slavery of validation and show you how to build an inner power that is not sold, not lent, and does not crumble. 1. Free yourself from the need for validation. It's like a traveler carrying a blank map, and instead of deciding his course, he waits for each person he meets to draw a path for him. He ends up walking without his own direction, exhausted from following tracks that lead him to no destination. That is the life of someone who depends on external validation, a borrowed life, designed by the eyes of others and not by one's own will. As long as you continue seeking approval, you will be a slave to applause, recognition, and the gaze of others. You will never be your own master. This need is not a simple mistake. It is an invisible chain that cuts freedom and makes you a prisoner of others' opinions. The problem is that this addiction disguises itself as acceptance, affection, or interest, and silently weakens your character. The first step to free yourself is to understand that external validation is an unstable resource. Today you receive it, and tomorrow it disappears. No matter what you do, there will always be someone who criticizes, rejects, or ignores your effort. To pretend that your worth depends on something so volatile is to condemn yourself to eternal insecurity. Here comes the Stoic teaching. The only thing in your control is your mind, your actions, and your discipline. You can't control what others think, but you can decide how much weight you give to those opinions. Each time you respond calmly to criticism, you are training your emotional independence. A practical tip is to learn to act without justifying yourself. The habit of giving explanations is a sign of dependence. If you decide something and know it is right for you, do it without embellishments. You don't need to convince anyone of your path. Start with small steps, from rejecting an invitation you don't want to expressing your opinion straightforwardly. Another practice is to review your motivations before acting. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I truly desire it or because I hope to be seen? If you find it's for recognition, stop. This exercise of honesty will help you differentiate what comes from your essence from what comes from the fear of not being accepted. Keeping a journal can be very helpful. Write down each situation where you feel that need for validation and reflect on what you were really looking for. Over time, you will see patterns and be able to break them. Also, surround yourself with spaces where you are not constantly evaluated. Dedicate moments to silence, reading, reflection without an audience. In these spaces, you learn to stand on your own, without witnesses, and that's where your real strength is born. Solitude ceases to be a threat and becomes an ally, because in it there are no judgments, only clarity. Train yourself to enjoy activities without the need to share them on social networks or wait for comments. Each time you do, you are building inner freedom. Don't ignore the power of redefining your language. Stop thinking I need to be recognized and change it to I recognize myself. This mental shift seems small, but it creates a solid foundation of self-esteem. Value your achievements in private, celebrate them, even if no one knows. What you do in silence weighs more than what you show with noise. The strongest advice is this: stop begging for what you can give yourself. Genuine recognition starts within you, not on the lips of others. Each time you stand without seeking applause, your dignity grows. Over time, that dignity becomes a wall that no criticism can tear down and no praise can manipulate. Freeing yourself from the need for validation is an act of rebellion against the superficial world that wants to dictate your worth. 2. Turn loneliness into your strength. Loneliness is like a dimly lit room that many fear to open, but those who dare to enter discover that there are no monsters there, but a space where all noise disappears and the only thing left is your true voice. The fear of being alone is one of the heaviest chains a person can drag, because that fear pushes to seek company even if it is toxic, approval even if it is empty, or distractions that only fill for a moment. The problem is that when you run away from loneliness, you also run away from yourself, and no one can build inner strength if they spend their life escaping from their own company. Stoicism teaches us that loneliness is not punishment but training. If you learn to be with yourself, without masks and without an audience, you discover that you no longer need so much from the world to sustain you. The first piece of advice is to change the way you interpret those moments. Don't say I'm alone. Say it as I'm with myself. That simple mental twist transforms abandonment into presence, because you're not empty, you're in direct contact with what you are. Make the exercise of staying silent for a few minutes each day, without music, without a phone, just breathing and observing your thoughts. At first, you will feel discomfort, like someone entering a room that has been closed for a long time, but little by little that discomfort will turn into calm. Another useful practice is to use loneliness to build instead of consume. Many people fill those spaces with distractions, series, networks, empty conversations. Instead, take the opportunity to read, write, plan, or reflect. Ask yourself out loud, what do I want to change about myself? What am I avoiding facing? By putting your thoughts into words, loneliness ceases to be an uncomfortable silence and becomes a mirror that reveals clarity. Write in a notebook what you feel in those moments, not to publish or share it, but to free your mind. It is also key to stop associating loneliness with rejection. No one abandons you when you decide to be with yourself. On the contrary, you strengthen yourself. Go for a walk alone. Have a coffee without company. Enjoy a moment without having to share it on networks. These are small exercises, but they train your mind to see loneliness as freedom and not as lack. The more you practice, the more you will notice that you no longer choose company out of fear of silence, but out of a genuine desire to share. This completely changes the quality of your relationships. One more piece of advice is to use loneliness as a filter. If you can't enjoy an activity alone, maybe it's not really valuable to you. Give it a try. What you can endure alone is what truly belongs to you. This practice will allow you to distinguish what you do for yourself from what you do to be seen. And when you notice that you don't need company to feel fulfilled, you will have in your hands a strength that many never get to know. Loneliness, well understood, does not weaken, it forges. It is the invisible gym where you train your mind, the place where your spirit becomes firmer and your judgment clearer. Whoever fears being alone will always be vulnerable to manipulation, because they will prefer company that destroys them rather than silence that strengthens them. Whoever learns to turn loneliness into their strength, on the other hand, will never be at the mercy of anyone, because they know that their best refuge always accompanies them. 3. Protect the sacredness of your inner world. The mind is like a house with many open doors. If anyone can enter, you will soon find that the clutter, noise, and even other people's trash end up occupying every corner. That's what happens when you don't protect your inner world, when you let anyone comment, criticize, or place their insecurities within you. The result is that you lose clarity, you lose strength, and little by little you stop listening to yourself. The sacredness of your interior is not a luxury, it is the basis of your stability. And if you don't defend it, everything external devours it. Stoicism teaches that the true empire of a human being is his mind, and that nothing should have more priority than safeguarding it. But we live in a time where overexposure is seen as normal. We share everything, we show everything, we let others comment on what we feel and think. The problem is that by opening every door without a filter, your peace fragments. Protecting the sacredness of your interior means learning to decide what you share and what you keep. Not everything needs to be explained. Not everything needs to be exposed. The first piece of advice is to set clear boundaries on what you show of your life. You don't need to post every achievement for it to exist, nor every fall for it to have value. Start practicing restraint. Learn to enjoy achievements in private, to solve problems without telling the world. This practice trains you to value the experience more than validation. Over time, you discover that what is kept inside you gains more strength because it is not subject to external judgments. Another crucial step is to control access to your attention. Empty conversations, negative comments, and constant exposure on social media consume mental energy. Every time you give your attention without a filter, you give up your power. Create disconnection spaces where you only listen to your voice. Dedicate moments to silence, reading, or personal writing. This reinforces the wall that protects what you think and feel. It is also vital to learn to observe without absorbing. Many times we let what others think settle in as absolute truth. But the external is just noise if you don't give it permission to stay. When someone criticizes, look at them as a visitor knocking at the door. You decide if they enter or not. That simple perspective changes everything because you understand that your inner world is yours, not an open field for anyone. A practical exercise is to establish rituals that strengthen your interior. It could be writing down 3 things you're grateful for each night, meditating a few minutes upon waking, or simply taking a deep breath before starting the day. These rituals are reminders that your center is under your care. No one else needs to approve or understand it. The sacred is nourished by discipline, not applause. The last piece of advice is to remember that protecting your inner world is not selfishness, it's responsibility. Whoever doesn't take care of their mind ends up reacting impulsively, living to please, or weakening with each criticism. Whoever protects the sacred within themselves, on the other hand, develops a firm calm, a clarity that is non-negotiable. This calm becomes the basis of every decision and the shield against the external. Your inner world is a temple. Allow entry only to what builds and expel what tries to dirty it. This is the Stoic practice of true strength, understanding that the most valuable is not shown, it is kept, cultivated, and protected with everything. Because losing your peace is losing everything, and defending it is the greatest sign of respect towards yourself. 4. Transform rejection into clarity. Rejection resembles a door slamming shut in your face. The noise shakes you, and for a moment you think everything is over. But if you stand still long enough, you discover that it's not the end of the road, but a signal, forcing you to look in a direction you didn't see before. Every time someone rejects you, instead of sinking, you have the opportunity to gain clarity about who you are, what you're looking for, and where you want to go. What seems like a wound becomes a compass if you know how to interpret it. The most common mistake is to turn rejection into a sentence, as if it meant that you have no value or that you are not enough. This interpretation stems from dependence on external validation. When someone rejects you, they are not dictating your essence. They are simply expressing their limits, their fears, or their choices. Stoicism teaches to separate what is in your control from what is not. You can't control others' reactions, but you can decide what meaning you give to that no. Turning it into defeat or transforming it into clarity depends solely on you. The first piece of advice is to learn to receive rejection without dramatizing it. Breathe, stop, and observe the situation as a fact, not as a personal attack. This practice prevents you from sinking into exaggerated interpretations. Each no can be seen as a filter that eliminates what was not for you, and that filter is necessary so that what truly belongs to you has space in your life. Change the question, why didn't they accept me? To what is this rejection showing me about myself or my path? Another piece of advice is to use rejection as a mirror. Ask yourself if there is something to improve, not from guilt, but from constructive self-criticism. Perhaps the situation shows that you need to strengthen your discipline, adjust your communication, or choose a different environment. When you face what rejection is pointing out to you, you turn it into a teacher. But you must also learn to let go when rejection has nothing to teach you. Not everything is your fault. Often you simply do not fit others' expectations. And that too is freedom. A powerful practice is to train the mind to see each rejection as a redirection. Write it on a paper every time something doesn't go as you wanted. This brings me closer to a clearer path. This statement is not self-deception. It is mental discipline to remember that nothing that is authentically yours is lost by a no. What is lost is what was not meant to stay, and accepting the truth gives you a peace that nothing external can steal from you. It is also useful to surround yourself with activities that strengthen your identity beyond approval. Exercise, study, create personal projects, practice meditation. When your value is nourished by what you build in silence, external rejections lose weight. Each no stops being a devastating blow and becomes a push towards a yes more consistent with your essence. Transforming rejection into clarity is choosing not to see it as a wall, but as a crossroads. If someone closes the door on you, don't keep banging on it. Turn and look for the route that this refusal has just illuminated. There lies the Stoic practice in understanding that what seems like loss is actually direction. Because rejection does not define your value, it only clarifies where you should not stay. And that clarity is what drives you to move forward with more strength and determination. 5. Detach from the noise and conserve your energy. The mind is like a calm lake that reflects everything clearly. But when you throw stones non-stop, the water stirs and the image distorts until you can't distinguish anything. That's the effect of constant noise in your life. Empty conversations, unnecessary opinions, never-ending notifications, and criticisms disguised as advice. If you don't learn to detach from all that hustle and bustle, your energy scatters, your peace shatters, and you end up reacting instead of acting with clarity. Inner strength is not built amidst scandal. It is forged in the silence of those who know how to filter what deserves their attention. Stoicism teaches that your energy is your most valuable resource, and that you should not give it to what is not in your control. When you get hooked on rumors, on useless arguments, or on the need to respond to everything, you fall into a game that only wears you out. That's why the first practice is to carefully choose where you put your focus. Before speaking or reacting, ask yourself, does this contribute to my life, or does it rob me of energy? That simple question can save you from unnecessary arguments and thoughts that lead nowhere. A practical tip is to learn to let go of the urgency to be present in everything. You don't need to have an opinion in every conversation or respond to every provocation. Silence can be your greatest act of power because it shows that you are not available for any noise. Start by reducing exposure to sources that only feed distraction. Spend less time on social media, filter the news you consume, and select better the conversations you hold. At first, it will seem like you are distancing yourself from the world, but in reality, you are getting closer to what matters. Another practice is to train your ability to listen without absorbing. When someone criticizes or tries to impose their vision, observe without getting hooked. Imagine their words are stones falling into the lake, but you decide whether to let them stir it or not. That emotional distance allows you to conserve energy and maintain clarity, even in the midst of conflict. Every time you choose not to react to the trivial, you strengthen your inner dominion. It is also key to create daily moments of disconnection. It could be a silent walk, 10 minutes of meditation, or simply turning off your phone for a while. These spaces are like cleaning the lake of your mind, removing the stones and returning it to calm. The energy you save in these moments becomes strength for what really matters. What many call boredom is actually fertile ground for creativity and clarity. An additional tip is to review your environment. Ask yourself if the people you spend the most time with boost you or drain you. If you notice that certain conversations always end in complaints, criticisms, or comparisons, establish distance. It's not about cutting everyone off, but about setting firm boundaries on the access they have to your energy. Remember that every minute you spend on noise is a minute you lose from building your inner strength. Detaching from the noise doesn't mean locking yourself away. It means intelligently choosing which voices deserve to enter your space. Conserving your energy is an act of discipline, a reminder that you don't have to react to everything or spend your peace on what doesn't build. Thus, your mind remains clear like a calm lake, and your strength accumulates in silence. That is the Stoic practice, living with focus, with calm, and with the power to decide where to place your attention. Whoever masters their energy, masters their life. 6. Defend your boundaries firmly. A field without fences is soon invaded by anyone who passes by, not because everyone has bad intentions, but because there is nothing to remind them how far they can go. Such is the life of those who do not set boundaries. An open terrain where the demands, criticisms, and abuses of others end up sweeping away peace and energy. Defending your boundaries does not mean erecting unbreakable walls. It means drawing clear lines that protect the most valuable things you have: your time, your mind, and your dignity. The mistake of many is to think that setting boundaries is an act of selfishness, when in reality, it is a form of self-respect and clarity towards others. Stoicism teaches that nothing external can harm you if you do not allow it, but when you constantly yield for fear of causing discomfort, you surrender your power and lose control of your life. Learning to say no firmly is one of the greatest exercises in self-control, because it not only protects your energy, it also sends a message to your mind that your worth does not depend on pleasing others. The first piece of advice is to stop justifying every boundary you set. You don't need to give long explanations to say no. A clear and respectful response is enough. Practice it in small situations. Reject a commitment you don't want. Limit time with someone who always drains you. Cut off a conversation that doesn't contribute. Every time you do this, you strengthen the idea that your well-being is non-negotiable. Another piece of advice is to identify your weak points, those places where you tend to yield more. It could be at work, in the family, or in friendships. Write down in a notebook the situations in which you end up saying yes when you really wanted to say no. This practice will make you aware of where you need to be firmer. And when you face something similar again, remember that the discomfort of saying no lasts seconds, but the discomfort of betraying yourself lasts much longer. It's also important to learn to recognize the signs that someone is crossing your boundaries. You may notice it in your body when you feel tension, anger, or exhaustion. These emotions are alarms indicating that something is not right. Listen to them and act accordingly. Don't ignore that inner voice, because it's your best defense before the damage is greater. Another useful practice is to establish clear consequences. It's no use saying, "I don't like the way you talk to me," if you then tolerate it over and over again. Firmness is not in the words, but in the actions that back them up. If someone insists on crossing your boundaries, take distance, cut off access, or reduce contact. It's not revenge, it's self-respect. The last piece of advice is to understand that your boundaries are a filter that attracts the right people. Those who respect you do not distance themselves because you say no. On the contrary, they will value your clarity. Those who get upset or try to manipulate you were never on your side. Defending your boundaries does not leave you alone. It frees you from those who never deserved to be in your life. A field with fences is not a closed place. It is a cared-for space where everything that grows inside has the opportunity to flourish. Your life works the same way. When you defend your boundaries, you protect your peace, conserve your energy, and send a message to the world. Here is a person who respects themselves and who is not sold at the price of approval. That is true firmness and is the hallmark of an inner strength that no one can bend. 7. Embrace your shadow and make it part of your power. The shadow resembles that echo you hear in an empty room. You ignore it because you can't see it, but it's there, repeating what you don't want to acknowledge. The more you run away, the louder it resonates. This is what happens with the parts of you that you reject: fears, wounds, frustrations, mistakes. If you deny them, they don't disappear. They hide and rule from the darkness. Whoever lives denying their shadow is a slave to what they silence, but whoever faces it and integrates it becomes a complete and authentic person. Stoicism teaches that we should not fear what hurts, because pain is also a teacher. Your shadow is part of you, and trying to live as if it didn't exist only feeds the dependence on external validation. Showing only the perfect face is acting, not living. The first piece of advice is to stop disguising your weaknesses. Acknowledge them without guilt. Say it clearly. I am afraid, I am insecure, I have flaws. This act of honesty frees you because what you accept stops controlling you. Another step is to observe the moments when your shadow appears. It could be in the anger you don't understand, in the sadness you hide, or in the envy you deny. Instead of rejecting them, stop and look at them calmly. Ask yourself what they want to show you. Often, envy points to what you want to build. Anger reveals where you feel your boundaries are crossed, and sadness reminds you of what you value. When you translate the shadow into messages, it ceases to be an enemy and becomes a guide. A practical tip is to work with writing. Dedicate a few minutes each night to pour into a notebook what you normally wouldn't say out loud. It's not about others reading it, it's about releasing what you hide. This practice will help you recognize patterns and understand which part of your shadow needs attention. By seeing your thoughts on paper, the unconscious becomes conscious and you regain control. It is also important to practice self-acceptance in everyday life. When you make a mistake, instead of punishing yourself, see it as evidence that you are on the path to growth. Failure does not define you, it teaches you. Each wound is a scar, and each scar is a memory that you resisted. If you hide these marks, you deny your history. If you integrate them, they become symbols of your strength. Another useful exercise is to gradually expose what you hide in safe spaces. Talk to someone you trust about your fears or insecurities, not seeking pity, but validating your right to feel. This act breaks down the idea that showing vulnerability is weakness. In reality, it is a testament to courage. When you integrate your shadow into your being, you project authenticity, and authenticity attracts respect. The last piece of advice is to remember that your shadow is not an obstacle. It is raw energy. If you repress it, it becomes a burden, but if you transform it, it becomes fuel. Everything you hide today can become a growth engine. Insecurity turns into discipline, fear into prudence, sadness into sensitivity. The key is not to run away from who you are, but to embrace it firmly. The shadow will always be with you. You can't eliminate it, but you can choose how to live with it. Integrating it is a step towards freedom, because you no longer depend on showing only what pleases. You are complete, with lights and shadows, and from this totality arises your most real power. Embrace your shadow, and you will see how what was once a source of shame becomes the foundation of your inner strength. 8. Make self-mastery your personal signature. Life resembles a wild horse trying to take you in all directions. If you don't take the reins, you'll end up being dragged by impulses, emotions, and external circumstances. Self-mastery is that firm rein that allows you to maintain control even when the storm intensifies. It's not about repressing what you feel, but about governing it, being the master of your mind instead of a prisoner of your reactions. Whoever masters their inner self doesn't need to prove anything to the world, because their true strength is not in what they show, but in what they can sustain in silence. The mistake of many is to confuse self-mastery with rigidity. It doesn't mean becoming a stone without emotions. It means having the ability to choose how to respond instead of being dragged by chaos. Stoicism makes it clear: you can't control what happens outside, but you can control your interpretation and your response. That's the difference between someone who lives reacting and someone who lives deciding. The first advice to cultivate self-mastery is to train patience. Before reacting, breathe and give your mind space to respond with clarity. The practice is simple but powerful. Every time you feel anger or anxiety, delay your response a few seconds. That small margin is the ground where you sow your power. Over time, that pause becomes a habit that saves you from impulsive decisions and strengthens you against any provocation. Another piece of advice is to establish routines that force you to maintain discipline. Self-mastery is built in the everyday, not in grand speeches. Getting up at the time you decided, sticking to exercise even when you don't feel like it, controlling your food intake, dedicating time to what's important without falling into distractions. Each act of discipline is a silent declaration that you command over yourself. Not everything you want is good for you, and not everything you desire deserves your energy. Self-mastery allows you to distinguish between preference and necessity, between what drives your growth and what only feeds your ego. Ask yourself before acting, does this bring me closer to my purpose, or does it take me away from it? That simple question prevents you from wasting your strength on paths that build nothing. Another practice is to control the internal dialogue. The mind can be the worst enemy if you don't train it. Every time a thought appears that weakens you, replace it with one that reminds you of your ability to sustain yourself. It's not about empty phrases, but about remembering with facts what you've already overcome. Self-mastery is not only physical, it's also mental, and it strengthens every time you decide not to feed the voice that sabotages you. A final piece of advice is to see each difficulty as a training field. Adversity doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to test whether you really govern your inner self. When you face criticisms, failures, or losses, see them as tests where your personal signature must speak louder than your emotions. If you stand firm, if you don't let yourself be dragged, you demonstrate that your value doesn't depend on the external, but on your ability to sustain yourself with dignity. Self-mastery is the invisible signature you leave on each action. It doesn't make noise, it doesn't need applause, but it's noticeable in the calmness with which you speak, in the firmness with which you decide, and in the clarity with which you walk. Making it your personal signature means that you are no longer a slave to impulses or opinions. You are the master of your life, and that is the greatest display of strength that a human being can achieve. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment "I am Stoic" as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your stoic mind.